Thank you so much for joining us for today's Brown Bag webinar. Glad to see you. This is Mark Dempsey with the National Convergence Technology Center, welcoming you to today's presentation of an introduction to Jupyter Notebook and JupyterLab. If you haven't already, please do put your name in your school in the chat box so we can keep track of attendance. And there will be time possibly at the end for Q&A, but along the way, if you have questions from the chat box, Christine and I are watching that. We'll relay that to Adam so you can answer those. There'll also be a very quick short survey at the very end, so stick around for that if you would, please. Okay, so our presenter today is Adam Richardson. He is an assistant professor of cybersecurity at Lansing Community College, a founding member of the Capital Area IT Council Cybersecurity Group, an advisor for the LCC AI Club, and a software engineer on the side. So thank you, Adam, for being with us today. I'm going to now stop sharing my screen so you can start. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. Can everyone hear me okay? Do we have,
Okay.
all right, I see Mark shaking. Yes, that's always a good start, right? Now, I also want to know, I have a backup setup in place because Murphy's Law will always kick in. My internet's usually pretty good, but I actually have the T-Mobile home internet now too as a backup. And I have to say 5G, I'm pretty pleased. So let's get this party started. First and foremost, yeah, I think party is the word, right? Because think of the time of the season it is for us professors. So let's get this set up correctly here. This is how I feel right now. Actually, even let me add some music because we've worked too hard for this point. Professors, it's about to be our wonderland. Winter break. We've worked so hard for this. What will you do during your time? Will you actually sleep? Will you actually enjoy your family? What will you do? I don't know. All I know is it's a wonderful time of year, and we've worked hard for this. So let's come together. I'm going to give you some information on Jupyter notebooks and labs. Maybe you can do that over break. It's fun, I promise. So let me get out of it. It's that time of year. Who would schedule one of these during a finals period for many people? Oh, wait, I did that. Sorry. So let's come over here and look at some slides related to Jupyter Notebook and Jupyter Labs. First things first, when we're thinking about this, let me get this. Here we go. I'm going to go to a brief history here. We only have 30 minutes, so I'm just going to crank through some stuff. We started with IPython, interactive Python, and it was pretty cool. When it first came out, I thought, wow, this is slick. It's very interactive. I love it. Well, it did some things very well. We have Python and scientific computing represented very well in this. And so the name IPython, it made sense, perfectly good sense. However, it started to do other things very well. For instance, you don't have to limit yourself to just Python on here. As we'll see, you can use other languages like Julia, Java, MATLAB. You can do general computing on this. It's a wonderful programming environment. So just as, you get a dog at first, a puppy, and you're thinking, this is the perfect name for this puppy. But then eventually you realize, you know what? I'm not sure I should have called you Quiet, whatever the case. Well, they changed the name because IPython no longer really fit. It did too much. So now it's called Jupyter Notebook. So that's the first thing, because it's very confusing when you come from the outside and you see it the first time. You're thinking, all these names, how do they relate? It was a nomenclature change because it did so many things so well as it grew. In terms of architecture, it's really two components. We have a user interface, and that's what we'll be interacting with. But behind the scenes, we have what's called a kernel. And the kernel is what allows us to actually run different languages, different environments so readily with this notebook interface. By separating the two, it made for a very extensible environment. So how do you get this, right? Like, that's one of the first questions. You're thinking, I want to enjoy this over our winter break. Well, lucky for you, you have a lot of very easy options. First and foremost, you can go directly to the website, jupyter.org. You can download the software and you'll have a working environment up running very soon. You can also, and that's the route I tend to go, you can also install Anaconda, which is, as they say, a data science platform that includes Jupyter Notebook. Anaconda just facilitates getting a bunch of stuff all at once, which I like. I like lots of stuff, and I like to get it all at once instead of having to piecemeal and then getting everything to play nicely with each other. Finally, there's another option you should be aware of. If you want to use notebook functionality, you can use Google Collaboratory. That's free up online. If you just do a Google search, you'll find it. And you can create notebooks that run on their infrastructure. Very similar functionality to Jupyter. That said, there are a few differences when you're dealing with local files, etc. You have to jump through a few extra hoops. But all of these very good, easy options to jump into this and start to play around with Jupyter. So instead of just talking about it, let's take a look at it here. So let me change my scene. So this is a Jupyter notebook. Right now, it doesn't look like much, does it? Trust me, it's great. You'll see this is how you want to spend your winter break. So over here, let me get my cursor. I've got several screens here. Now, first and foremost, this is just a web browser. As you see the tabs across the top. It's nothing fancy in terms of interface. If I right click, as you see, you're getting the same options. Oh, actually, it's not showing up on your screen, that right click. Well, it's the same options that you get when you right click over any web page. This is just a web page, but the kernel acts as a server behind the scenes, and it's just processing the requests as you type in code. First and foremost, it doesn't have to be code. These are notebooks after all, so it makes sense that we can actually do documentation like work. So first and foremost, I can put in the markdown for a header. Let's just call it Jupyter Wonderland. Now notice if I hit enter in a cell, it doesn't do anything. It just says, okay, you want to enter more stuff. And I could, when I hit backspace, if you want to execute a cell, if you want it to perform some work, in this case for markup, it's going to render the markup. I can go shift, enter. I now have an H1 header in this notebook. Now, typically we don't just document things, though. That wouldn't be any good. We actually use code to do some work. So let's have a look here. I can actually put in something very basic. I want to show you one of the things that can trip people up. So let's first just look at some of the basics. We know a print. Actually, before I jump here, I'm using Python, and you can see over here, upper right, it says Python 3. I could change the kernel and I could run Java, I could run Scala, I could run MATLAB, etc. Jupyter Notebook supports all of these. And I have to say I've used a few of them. I like Julia as another option for data science-y sort of machine learning work. So let's just print something out. Hello, winter, not hello world. For us right now, this time of year, hello, winter break. So notice, again, if I just hit enter, it doesn't execute any code, but if I actually do shift enter, it actually executes it and it puts the output right there. All right, so far, nothing incredibly amazing, but let's have another look here. I'm going to add some more stuff here so we can take a peek at how it actually works. Notice as I execute these cells, there's a number, an index that's beside them. You can see I already had executed some cells. Jupyter is just cell by cell as I execute the cell, not the order on the page. That's a big distinction. As I execute the cell, it's going to execute that code in that kernel environment. So let me define a quick function, and this is not Earth, all of you can code very well, I'm sure. This is that incredible code, but it's just here to show that aspect. I've got a function here now, and if I actually use that function, at this point, it's nice to show that to show the state for a particular variable, I could just enter the variable itself and execute that cell, and then it outputs. I don't have to print anything. It just automatically outputs the result right there in the notebook. But let's say I come back up here and I want to see what the state is up here. I'm going to actually change this code. Remember back here, it would have been 1, but if I execute this now, it's 2. The point is, and notice the indexing of the cells. That was the most recently executed cell. That's cell 12. And so it goes in terms of the order that you execute the cells, not in terms of how they lay out on the page. That said, oftentimes you will want them to execute in order on the page. And so let's look at some functionality here. The kernel dropdown is where you can do a lot of great work related to this. You can interrupt a kernel, restart it, restart and clear output. So if I restart and clear output, it's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Notice all the output is gone. It's just disappeared. But I can now run this. And I just ran that cell. If I want to run all of these, again, you can restart and run all. And if you have a set that are all supposed to run in sequence, oh, and look, I forgot, look at the error. It actually puts out very nice error feedback. And so let me actually fix what I broke before. And now kernel-wise, I can actually restart and run all again. And so see, when you're prototyping, it actually is very convenient to use a notebook, at least for me, because I can go step by step, cell by cell, get one cell to work, and then I move forward, et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, if you're developing something that you have a massive amount of classes, et cetera, then that's a different story. But for a lot of machine learning, data science type of work, you're working in stages. You start by getting the data, cleaning the data, et cetera. And so we'll see that this has a lot of useful properties for that purpose. Now let's look at, I'm going to actually come back here. I want to show you Anaconda, which is what I used to get this. And then we're going to compare two different environments, Jupyter Notebook and JupyterLab. So let me share my desktop scene. So here's Anaconda. This is the all-in-one sort of solution for downloading a lot of data science, machine learning related resources in one fell swoop. I love it. I actually had already launched Notebook, Jupyter Notebook here. I've been talking about Notebook so far. However, another thing that can be confusing to people new to this is that you'll see JupyterLab over here too, and you're thinking, well, don't I already have Jupyter Notebook? Why would I need JupyterLab? Consider, just as IPython got to a point where it didn't fully describe all that Jupyter could do, Jupyter Notebook has grown to the point where that name can be a bit of a misnomer too. JupyterLab brings in new functionality and new capabilities, like the ability to debug. You can set breakpoints, etc. And so it has evolved in such a way where it's so much more powerful and different. We'll look at it and compare in just a bit here. It made sense to offer something that was completely new in terms of nomenclature. So that's Anaconda. You can actually manage your packages that are installed right through this. You can head over to environments and I can see packages that I've installed for various purposes. It's very convenient because if you've worked with Python and other languages before, you'll know it's easy to misconfigure your environment and accidentally break something. Not that I've ever done that a million times. So this actually automates that in a way where it's much easier. You just come over here, click something. If you want to find something new, I look for not installed and I can go grab it. I just click the checkbox, install it, and then it's there ready for my Jupyter environment. Now, let's head back over to the browser and take a look at this again. That's a very primitive example. You're thinking, Adam, I came here for this. Are you kidding me? I already teach my students Python and this is a waste of my time. Sorry. I have to start somewhere. So this is a quick notebook that I wrote up that's processing job data. I want to help my leaders, my deans, my boss, the leaders at the college as a whole understand what we're seeing in terms of the job market. So I've been scraping, or I did a few months ago, scraped a vast number of listings from Indeed. And I'm using a Jupyter notebook to actually process this. So you'll see I've done some importing. I grabbed the data here. Notice it's a CSV file. And if we use libraries, the libraries you're going to hear the most are Pandas, Matplotlib, NumPy. Those libraries are going to be frequently referenced in any type of conversation covering notebooks, Jupyter notebooks. And so I'm using Pandas there. That's what the PD stands for, according to my import statement, to import my data. And I'm just taking a quick peek. Notice I just called head 10. I just want to see the first 10 rows to make sure I didn't already break something. I probably did the first time I imported it. And then I look at the end just to make sure, okay, everything looks good so far. Then I'm using something called Beautiful Soup. That's a library that makes it very easy to parse HTML and grab the content out of there that you're looking for. And I do some manipulation. I remove some tags. I'm basically getting it ready to do some more types of analyses. For instance, I've got right here, I've created a word cloud. And that I didn't have to do a lot of work for this. I just imported the word cloud module, and then I just executed it after preparing the data for this. And so I can see different terms that show up. I save this in an SVG format, so that way I can bring it into other environments very easily. Now, I did some searches initially where I just did primitive string searches, but then I realized, you know what? Come on, Adam, you got to do a better job than that. If you're really trying to come up with data here that truly represents what's in the listings. So I actually changed to a regex approach. And again, using Jupyter notebooks, I make sure that I'm seeing what I want to see. And what I can do now, I'm going to scroll down. I can actually, I'm going to scroll this down a bit here so you can see it better. Right within Jupyter Notebook, I can embed my output, my graphs, so that I can compare and see what the trends are. It happens right within the notebook. I don't have to go anywhere else. I just simply, I integrate Matplotlib, and I'm actually just performing some basic work to get it ready here for graphical representation. And then right within the notebook, I can see the results. And then this drives new analyses. I see this result and I think, the cloud is a big deal. Look at the cloud here. Let me scroll up so you can see that better. The cloud has showing up in a ton of listings for us locally. This was a 50-mile radius. So I then decided to do more analysis related to the cloud specifically. I also looked at a correlation matrix of terms, but let's jump down here. I want to show you associative analysis. So this is market basket analysis. I'm doing some quick work. Because of that previous graph, I decided I want to explore the relationship between these particular terms. And eventually I'm going to focus in on the cloud down below. And so notice that's where I ended up here on this particular notebook. The idea is you often, for this type of exploratory work, you don't really know where you're going. But if you can integrate all of the analyses, all of the visual representations right within the same notebook, it helps you decide where best makes sense. And so at the end here, I was looking for powerful associations with the cloud. I wanted to see what other things we should be looking at if we're looking to better our cloud pathway offerings. Now, this is a notebook, a Jupyter notebook, but I have another tab open of a JupyterLab. Let's look at the difference, just so you see it, because this can be people, again, when you're first exposed, you're thinking, what's the difference? Notice in the left column, much like you have a project window or pane in something like Visual Studio, etc., this has been reorganized so that there could be a project pane to the left. And additionally, if we look over here, we can see I can actually set up breakpoints. I have a much more detailed view of what's actually happening, variable by variable, related to the call stack, etc. So this is much more along the lines of a full-fledged IDE than what the original notebook was. The original notebook made it very easily for us to store the documentation along with the code in one spot, and we could iterate very quickly. This takes it to the next level. This is what they call the next phase of Jupyter. And so this is the same notebook that we were looking at before, but in this case, this is the lab version of the kernel. So finally, one quick thing, you're thinking, scraping the web pages, Adam, that's a pain because of all the JavaScript. Sometimes I can't do that easily right now. Well, I'm working on a tool. We'll see if I can just share it. I'm working on a tool to facilitate that, make it a little bit easier, where you can actually, I can probably just show my desktop really briefly. What is it, 154? So I will switch to my desktop scene here, and let me just start up Visual Studio, and you'll see I will show, so this is Synergy, what I was working on. But essentially, I'm going to start this in debug mode. So I built this tool. Notice, so here it says which website. You can open Chrome. So now I can open Chrome if I click that. I already set the settings up, and I'm going to make Chrome small enough so it'll fit on this screen. And what I do, this is, you can think of this Synergy, that's an intentional name. The idea is there's an arms race between us and the people who want to protect their content on their pages. Scraping is legal. The LinkedIn court case shows it is legal on public websites, but that doesn't mean that they can't make their markup change by the day to make it difficult to scrape. So what I did is I set this up, and then I could do a search here for Java. Once I have the listing that I want, I say, hey, that seems like something I want to scrape. I just click the scrape button. That's now in CSV format. And then I can always go back with HTML soup, or beautiful soup rather, and parse that to pull out the information. So that's the quick take. And then I can look at this IT manager. That's not what I want. None of our students are going to be managers, at least from my program. So I'm jumping to the next one. Yes, I want that one. I'll scrape that. So that's the quick take, Shilpa. Sorry, it's a 30-minute presentation. It's hard to fit in everything, but here's the takeaway. It's the most wonderful time of year for us. We get to enjoy our winter break. All the correcting is almost done. And perhaps during some of your time, you can actually take a moment to explore Jupyter, both the notebook and then now the newer JupyterLab. It's incredibly capable. The final thing I want to share, actually, one last thing, because it's important. If you want to learn more, the easiest way to learn how to use this notebook is go over to Kaggle. And then if you look at specific competitions, for instance, the Netflix movies competition, people post their code in the public. You can see all of this beautiful code. You don't have to learn this from scratch. Just copy what other people do and then work on refining it and learning it. It makes for a great way to learn over at Kaggle. So, Merry Christmas. Yes, happy holidays. Season's greetings. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
That was great, Adam. Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. So we're putting in the chat box now a survey link. It's like 4 questions to get your take on how this went and how useful it was. Please do that survey if you would. I'll also email it to you. And one more quick final plug for our next Brown Bag webinar. That's set for Wednesday, January 25th. The subject for that one is going to be Agile and Lean Concepts. So invites for that will go out soon. All right, if you're watching a recording of this webinar, please share, follow, and like us.